Chill here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Soul Hour Saturn Day. Sun is in the 8th house since in Capricorn 6 degrees. 369. Venus 3 degrees Capricorn. Sun 6 degrees. Mars 9 degrees. The Moon is 3 degrees Aries. Squaring Venus. Applying to square Sun and Mars. The Ascendant is ruled by Mercury at 21 degrees Sag. Applying to 22. Enemy heaven is 1 degree Pisces. Ruled by Jupiter at 21 degrees Cancer. I talk about plan for sovereignty a lot. And following today's experience in meditation, I try to think other than the facts, other than the identity issue. Why is rape, basically, or sexual boundary violation, so sacred to secret societies that, like, why don't they do without it? And another thing had to do with drugs. So people sometimes use the genitals to smuggle drugs. In fact, one of the testimonies is not even testimonies, basically a text by a lady that had did in Israel was memories that had to do with that, to do with ritual abuse, because the people that smuggled the drugs had to be dissociated. Okay, so I want us to remove shame, blame from this discourse. I know that it's very difficult to actually viscerally, okay, it's not about removing the emotions. It's about, I want us to frame the discourse not as a shaming or blaming. Entire history of humanity, empires sustaining through war and hardship, was based on a lot of drug trafficking and laundering that for whichever legit natural resources. It could be gold, that could be metal. Saturn Neptune is showing us on the world degree the harsh reality of those type of endeavors, and the fact that all of our origin countries, those that survived, were based on that type of trade. It arises with the inability of societies, tribes, people to live with that anymore. What was to do what needed to be done to survive became something that people cannot live with doing anymore. Not because they're soft. Like I said, people underestimated the Me Too. And when I say plan for sovereignty and plan for sexual sovereignty, it does mean that those things will begin to create, okay, The fact that we're talking about that right now is because it begins to create world events. If I think about the case of Haymanut, a 9 years old Ethiopian girl kidnapped in Israel. Where is Haymanut? If she was organ harvested, that would expose. If she was sex trafficked, that would expose. If she has already mothered children, that would expose. And what about the communities where marrying a 9 years old to 12 years old child is considered something that happens? And people cannot live with that anymore. And even if they try to make it impossible for them to die, they will begin to have other complications and implications. It's the although it When I addressed that in 2017, I said, and although it does move, this is the although it does move. What did it mean for Leonardo da Vinci to look at an actual body of a human being and say, hey, dear church, your channeling is beautiful, but I need to treat it. If you need to treat a patient, when I wrote my thesis proposal, I came with the idea, and the philosopher of science, I talked about the philosophy of basically the body-mind question, and how do we epistemically look at it in the medicines. And at first I thought about Feyerabend, that a lot of people misunderstand. However, he was way more flexible when he talks about methodology, saying we cannot predict which methodology will bring us scientific revolution. In fact, it's the change of methodology that brings. And then I was moderated to Larry Loudon, to 1990s Larry Loudon, who talked about the role of technology in turning a controversial scientific theory into an accepted and a consensus. Okay, and with it, the democratization question of sciences. Now, doing astrology is quite relevant. And my instructor, that is also an MD, said to me, when I read Feyerabend, I don't know how to treat a patient. It's practically what Leonardo da Vinci said to the church. If basically the best argument for Leonardo da Vinci would be, if I would try to treat a patient with the channeling of the clergy, they would die. And sexual sovereignty is an essential component to live when it comes to the body. I didn't mean it just happened. It's the truth. Now the fact is, zero shame, zero blame. To sustain in a really harsh world, a lot of communities drug trafficked. They use the genitals. They use rape so people will be dissociated. They used sex trafficking for diplomatic ties and extortions to supposedly sustain, to survive, basically. But this coping mechanism of survival, Saturn, Neptune in Aries, the coping mechanism that we had for survival has lived through its expiration date. This is my prediction. And please understand, when I say that, I mean that on a scientific level. And you understand that a person like me that talks about that, and I come from academia, was unfortunately targeted for quite several testings regarding this very point that I talk about. And in all the settings, even the most loving, okay, even if I would receive belonging, love, all the emotional needs met, even that was not something that one is able to live with. And this was weird because up until now, or at least up until a decade ago, yeah, there are a lot of people that escaped and so on and so forth. But that this becomes such a crusade, especially when entire world's economy is based on that, which means that everyone went through these type of rituals and had to perpetuate them. And the things where it led, looking into this topic, was, oh, so this is how they make a bomb, so this is how they bomb, so this is how they get people to decide to bomb, so this is how, okay, this is how they get people to agree that all humanity dies, okay, this is how important sexual sovereignty is. Third generation to Holocaust survivor. Oh, of course, they raped Hitler. And it was, as a researcher, I was looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, something about sexual sovereignty here is different to the times. How should I say that? It brings me to the point, okay, where when I come to make world predictions and I say, how do we plan for the next 500 years? And I say, plan for sexual sovereignty. What are the industry? If there is zero rape society, let's say we found a way to enforce zero rape society and have all people meet their emotional needs and so on and so forth. What what collapses? What changes? What happens? What, because I always ask myself, what's the one thing that changes everything? If people are only included on the basis of them being raped, then it brings me to the previous episode. And yet, them being raped, and raping, because in these societies, um, And yet the importance of this particular factor, okay, rape, torture, and so on, the importance of that not existing is such that, how should I say it? If, let's say, torturing someone would be a deterrent so that they wouldn't think to try it again, it crosses the threshold, because now they don't think never to try it again. They say, okay, they manifest the ability to bomb to the essence, to the core, every single thing in the entire earth that created the existence of torture. Sexual sovereignty, same. Okay, anything that violates sexual sovereignty, same. It basically means that scientifically we crossed a certain threshold where, let's say, because I'm saying that I see women sometimes in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s. A lot of them, even when it comes to, let's say, the Me Too, they understand in retrospective that they swiped under the rug something that was not working for them. But it's not anywhere near what I'm talking about. So something genuinely and authentically crossed that threshold. And this is why I say that we need to plan for sexual sovereignty. Just like we think about AI and we say, oh, many jobs will be taken by AI. Okay? We need to plan for it. Think about what jobs cannot be done with sexual sovereignty. And think about AI, okay? If AI is going to be taking the jobs of the painter and the... Then we have to think and plan for what jobs cannot be done. Now, let's say intelligence. If we're doing... Can we not do intelligence without rape? The other way around. True cohesion is strategic intelligence. We saw it with Finland. After they worked with the Nazis, they began to think ahead. Eventually, they took housing first from United States for the homeless and open dialogue from Netherlands, treating schizophrenia without drugs, believe in the patient. If you would tell a person, how do you treat schizophrenia? Oh, this is when people are psychotic. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, guess what science found? What? You believe the patient. Psychotic. You believe that schizophrenia, you believe the... It's total... No. It's strategic intelligence. What do schizophrenic people... Let's say they're paranoid schizophrenic. Somebody's following me. Somebody's tracking my calls. Somebody's this. Somebody... Who's tracking your calls? The intelligence that... The KGB. Yeah. Oh, we have infiltration from the KGB. Difference being, one said the psychosis is dream is delusion. The other said this is information. Those that listened to schizophrenic people before 7th October knew. They didn't know what will happen. one of the most clearest insight into what Anneke Lucas is talking about before I even heard Anneke Lucas, and what Trudy Verstegen is talking about before I heard Trudy Verstegen, was a schizophrenic person that greeted me saying, "You look 200." I'm like, "Thank you." He said, "No, you're a very young soul." I said, "Okay." And then they began to talk, and what they told me was something that definitely sounded like psychosis, but was in verbatim things that are practiced in the world. With sexual sovereignty, it's true, we won't be able to silence these people, and we won't be able to dismiss their words. Plan for it. Plan for it. Adapt to the changing world. Yeah, that's everybody's lineage. When Finland began to believe the schizophrenic patient, it could sustain in the face of USSR and later Russia without having to work with Hitler. To the degree that it aligns with sexual sovereignty, it can sustain its own country's sovereignty. Because at the time of the Nazis, they weren't so sovereign. The cases like Heimanut show us that people do not swipe it under the rug. No, the Ethiopian enclosed secret community, and it's a secret religion, did not swipe it under the rug when Heimanut went missing. And they know, okay, about their lineages. They required people outside the Ethiopian community to find Heimanut. It's unprecedented. Think about 1996, they found Efye and I remember the name Efye, the other name, and those were the girls that were kidnapped by Marc Dutroux. Everybody, I remember Belgium, that person that kidnapped girls and kept them in an apartment. Okay, they tried to make it as a very weird psychopathic killer and rapist. It was 1996, 1997. Me and my mom traveled to Europe. And 2007, which was the case of Madeleine. Everybody, we were in Israel. Everybody, the news everywhere was talking about that. So I remember this as the psychopathic killer. But the older people, the people that went to the White March, the people in Europe, they remember it differently. They were waiting for Marc Dutroux to sing. And that case came back again to the news a couple of months ago. The White March, okay, think about the fact that they had to turn Europe upside down and bring a shit ton of foreign immigrants. It's not just silencing, because people wouldn't come off the streets for the Trudeauseers. They weren't doing nothing. And yes, it's also in their lineages. That was unprecedented. The White March was unprecedented. Years after, decades after. And trying to silence the Europeans. If people try to silence Europe, I think they should pick another battle. Particularly when each lineage is, when people have oaths of silence. They need to talk somewhere about something, which eventually exposes the very thing that they wanted to talk about in their oath of silence type of thingy. Now, the oath of silence is also throat chakra, expression, first and second chakra. What are the six chakras, okay? People needed to heal from sexual boundary violation. People could no longer live with that. Think about emotional intelligence. It's as important. Now, the world was not built in a way that allowed something that is imperative to sustain life. When we talk about humanity and economies, And so the people that are well prepared to the fact that the tolerance for this type of offense, a violation of sexual sovereignty, is decreasing. They can see into the future. Because this means that the bombs will go off on something that was not predicted before. If we know to identify that, then we understand what's needed to be accommodated for. Because one can be in the most loving family, the most loving environment, the most loving everything, be included and so on. Sexual violence existing, they cannot talk, they cannot this, they cannot that, they cannot that. They try to make it stop, try to make it stop. It doesn't stop. One sudden day, family gathering, boom! What happened? Is it a crisis for the world? Of course. People will use that there are hidden industries where they use sex trafficking and the genitals to smuggle drugs, and that gets laundered, and when it's a competing, then it's terror and crime and so on. And when it's the government, it's the wealth of nations. Now, what happens when the people cannot do that anymore? Those that learn first that people cannot do that anymore and adapt, those are the people that basically are more adaptable, and those that survive are the adaptable. Now, trying to make people adaptable to violation of sexual sovereignty, if I take it back to the water discipline, which is actually a very relevant topic, when they practiced water discipline in the army, in the IDF, and we learned about it in high school, people died. Water discipline meant water fasting. People died. They learned that people cannot adapt to no water. We are now growing people that cannot adapt to violation of sexual sovereignty. And the more there are attempts to make them adapt to that, the more radical their counter actions get. It's the although it does move of the coming Renaissance. Now, why was the church going against empiricism? I'm not talking about Galileo, I'm talking about Da Vinci. Because anybody can look at a person, okay? If that person died, they can look at a person, they can do an autopsy, okay? Unless they're like vomiting and they can okay, but other than that, anybody could look at that and practice science. How do we sustain the church in such a world? One of the ways that they brought is Mary Magdalene, which talked about gnosis. And basically honoring the gnosis, the individual. And for Neptune in Aries, it's a fantastic way of adaptation. That our inner knowing and intuition is not falling from prescribed religion. In fact, it's deepening the connection. And then people ask, but what's the place of the church in that? And perhaps things can be restructured. When we don't rape, we don't disconnect from the land and the wealth of the land. And then when we are connected, we find resources and alternate the resources so we don't exploit the land. When traveling, and now because traveling is a natural part of human existence, okay, that's allowing a different form of life. Basically, it's allowing more life on Earth. more care and communication between people. For example, the fact that I care to see where can I get the um, frankincense and myrrh essential oils from a source that doesn't bruise the tree, okay, that doesn't cut to heal, that doesn't bruise to heal. And it's like, oh, there is this tribe in Africa that's sustained by women that harvest. And then I discovered that there's another place in India. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I gave my mother the monthly cash, and I'm like, oh shit, I can't take out more cash to put in my international debit card. Okay, next month. However, this sense of interconnectedness allows us to source the ingredients and form connections in way more peaceful means. And diminish persecution. When we understand that a nation like Finland had to rely on believing schizophrenic patients to face the KGB, and it worked, we understand that what we considered soft, by including what we dismissed as data, and okay, it's basically a scientific revolution that allowed Finland to be sovereign. Not just in the face of Russia, but also in the face of NATO. They weren't so sovereign when they had to work with Hitler. And the fact that this thing sustains is showing us that our greatest fear, okay, basically survivalistic fear, it's what created that thing that we're dealing with right now, are not founded. And not only that, when it comes to sovereignty, lineage, legacy, a legacy can be wiped out the minute 2, 3 generations pass and people cannot live anymore with something that happened, let's say, in the family. Or by their guru, Osho. is just one study case. And sexual sovereignty, of course, means also energy, sexual energy sovereignty. Those who plan for sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter and in energy based world economy regimes, regardless of origin, bloodlines, and so on, they are the real preppers. You know, just today I saw this wonderful video by not just Catholic relics. These 5 survival foods are killing you, showing how everything from rice to honey that we conserve untended to and not meticulously inspected and held in meticulously correct conditions becomes poison. And when we actually need to rely on this conserved food, okay, you open a bucket of conserved rice. That rice was dying there for, I don't know, several years, let's say, if we're optimistic. Okay? You open the ancient pack of rice. It's tempus fight. You're going to eat the whole bucket or you're going to store them in portions. Not me, that's Forgotten Pulse. It's a reality check on preppers. When I lived in Arad, I prepped. There was pasta and there was rice and there was lentils and so on and so forth. And then I was violated in the astral, nobody sees, and had to flee the fuck out of there with all my childhood pictures, everything there, and all the conserved things, all the prepping. Was I not okay about an A-bomb dropping on the entire village? As long as everybody is included and not in the margins, so they wouldn't go, so I wouldn't be guilt tripped by the face of people with their skin going and so on and so on. So the point was not suffering. The point was the intensity of the violation. Boom. Why did that happen? Because they drilled the oil from the Dead Sea. Why did that happen to me? Because I was digging half moons rather than paying for extra water. So how many people such things happen? Googleplex! Googleplex! How many people carried for at least one fraction of a second the image of an entire village going boom in an A-bomb? Googleplex! That's a shit ton of energy feeding the egregore. It's manifesting. Sexual sovereignty. Is that something that could be predicted, that people will manifest such a thing 2, 3 decades ago? No. No. The world has changed. Did it not bring about Hiroshima and Nagasaki dropping on Japan? Of course it did. It's not that new. But those that try to swipe under the rug and think that they can go about not honoring a world, not honoring sexual sovereignty, and just get away with the results, with the this, with the that. Not anymore. Is it about feminism? No. Why does it happen only to women? No. It's about being a human. Do all the spiritual teachings that try to go in a roundabout way around it fall flat? Absolutely. If there is no world for the sexual sovereign being, does the world go boom? Natuurlijk. Do bunkers survive that? No. No. And you don't want them to. What would happen in those bunkers? What happened when they trafficked Sedna? Why they trafficked Sedna? Inuit story. To get power and control over nature. Okay, magia. Okay, magical powers. Who had affected the world more? Sedna. They had to appease Sedna, otherwise they wouldn't have no food. Goddess of marine life and the underworld. How are the food prices in Greenland? In Israel, veterans come back from the war with PTSD. Men, not just women, men tell them, wait a second. They went to rape. For one reason and one reason only, because they separated veterans PTSD from people that had other type of PTSD, which usually means that they were either raped or something that was meant to cause them to be raped. In the Superfarm, which is a pharmaceutical pharmacia, okay, apotheke, they tried to say that only the people that are in disability because of the war with PTSD have precedence in the line when they wait for their medications. How does that look like? Now, do people not care about veterans? No, it's not true. It's only when they disinclude the people that are recovering from rape that people stop caring, because if they disinclude people that try to recover from rape, from sexual boundary violation, from sexual harassment, from trafficking attempt and whatnot, okay, then people stop, they cross the threshold of being able to care because they're not cared for. We're a man